everybody, I'm Tom Vassell.
I'm Chris Yee.
And I'm Wendy Yee.
Today we're taking a look at the flat-out designed AEG game Point City. This is the highly anticipated sequel to Point Salad, which, by the way, made sense as a side reference because Point Salad was a joke that people would say about games where whatever you do, you get some points. So you make yourself a point salad. No one says it about cities.
Yeah, but they wanted to keep the nomenclature going, right?
I get it.
They didn't want to call
for
the
a line
city
of games.
salad.
Yeah,
true.
for a line of games, it's great.
Anyway, it's kind of well, I should say kind of. It's definitely a follow-up to Point Salad, but there are some changes. Let me show you how it plays. In this game, there are resource cards, and there's 3 cards. They're split into decks 1, 2, and 3 because they're going to change. You'll see that double resources and wilds will show up. And so you're going to shuffle them and then place the decks on top of each other. You're going to have a grid out in front of you. Each person's going to start with one ingenuity resource, which is like a wild resource in front of them. And you'll have some civic tokens out here. You're not going to use all the civic tokens, so they'll change from game to game. On your turn, you're going to take 2 cards. Now you can take the top 2 cards of the deck, so if you do that, you get some resources. I get a community and economy resource and put them in front of me. If you take 2 from the grid, they simply have to be adjacent to each other. So I can take community and energy. Now when you take cards from the middle, if you take a resource, the next card to replace it will be flipped over and turned into a building. So both of these turn into buildings here. If, let's say in a future turn, I take these 2 cards, then the resource would be a building and the building would turn into a resource. Here's the thing though, you can only take a building if you can pay for it. So this one requires 2 energy resources. So I could pay an energy and an ingenuity. These are discarded. And this building's in front of me. This building's going to be 2 things. It's worth a point, and it's also a resource for use of building other buildings. As the game goes by, maybe I want to build this ice cream truck here, where I already have the green here, and I'll just pay a purple. You can build 2 buildings on your turn, but you can only use these free resources for one of those 2 buildings. However, if you get multiples of these, they can stack up. And if you build a building, some buildings are points. If you build a building with this civic symbol here, you'll take one of these. These are going to give you points at the end of the game. Like, for example, this one here just gives 3 points for every combo of coin and industry that I have on my cards, on my buildings at the end of the game, the symbols in the top corner here. This one is just simply 7 points, and 4 for each missing type of resource that I've collected from buildings. As the game goes by, I said the resources are going to get better. You'll see you'll get double resources, but the buildings also get bigger. And so you can see in level 3, there's still these civic buildings, if any of them are left, but you'll see 4-point buildings. There's still buildings that are going to give you resources, which could give you points. And the game is going to end when this deck runs out, when it's placed out here. So everyone's going to have exactly 17 turns because the number of cards in this deck is going to be determined by the number of players. You'll add up all the points on your buildings and on your civic tiles, and whoever has the most is the winner. So there's a couple things off the bat here with Point City is, first of all, the game is at least twice as complex as Point Salad is. Mm-hmm. Point Salad is just really quick, grab some cards, turn them in for points. And I'm not going to keep talking about Point Salad the whole time. I just want to say that. Secondly, it says 15 to 30 minutes on the back of the box, and that is about as close to a lie as I've seen in a while. The game is definitely, it might be 15 to 30 minutes for 2 players. But if you go beyond that, it's going to take a little bit longer, and it's definitely going to, 15 minutes, that's really fast. And that's one of the things about this game is, it's not a super fast game. It sounds like it would be. Grab 2 resources, or grab 2 cards, one of them's a building, but you have to check to see if you can build that building, which is a very different thing. And I can't build that building, and because you have to take 2 cards that are adjacent to each other, you have to say, well, I would like to take that building, but I can't afford the 3 buildings that are next to it.
Right.
You can take 2 cards off the top, and there's also a rule that if there's 4 resources, you can't do it on turn 1, but if there's 4 resources, you can flip them all, I think.
Flip one card.
Or flip one of them into a building.
Yep.
Which, I don't know if I've ever used that rule, actually. I think it exists.
We have.
We have. Especially at the beginning, Because if you can't build that building that's out, that the previous person took, you can flip it and you can be like, hey, I'm flipping one. Can I build this now? So it's important at the beginning.
At some point in the game, there's just such a mix of them. And in fact, there might even be overwhelmingly buildings for a while. So you might end up just drawing cards off the top. You know what I mean? For a little
That
bit.
I've definitely seen.
Yeah.
As an aside, it's weird to me, and I don't know how to fix this without the game coming with a card holder. You can see the top card. Technically, you're not supposed to see the next card. But unless you are the neatest stacker in the world, you almost always will.
That doesn't bother me.
No, but it can make you decide to take the two off the top if I can see a wild as the second card.
It's fair.
Okay.
Wilds are good, but they're not like amazing. Like I won't divert a good turn to be like, oh, wild.
Yeah,
No,
if
but
I
I might take those two cards instead of two that are face up.
It's fair, sure.
Yeah, because I was like, if I'm going to take a building, I'm going to take a building. That's better than getting a wild any day. You can build.
No. I get. You should always take buildings. Speaking of buildings, the game has a splendorific. I don't know what. Someone needs to come up with a term for this. Don't make me do it, or you get ratchet again.
It's just a form of engine building. It's like a permanent resource engine
the
building.
permanent resource.
Yeah.
That needs a good name for it, though. I always say, like Splendor, and everyone goes, ah. It always happens. Yes, but that's not
works.
good if you haven't played Splendor.
Hey, tissue Kleenex.
That is always a hard thing as a reviewer to be like, this mechanism is very, very similar to Splendor, and as soon as I see that, if you know, you know. But if you don't, it's not a good reference point. Yeah. But yeah, it's got that very simple little engine build to it. You know, this is going to permanently give you another pink lightning bolt resource for the rest of the game. And that's cool. That's good, for sure.
I think it's interesting because we've played games where Chris got a ton of resources at the beginning and I got a couple buildings at the beginning because it's slower to get those buildings. And we've played both where both person is one. So it's not like you only have to go for buildings. There's one strategy. Like getting the heavy resources at the beginning worked for you one of the times.
What did you think about the civic buildings?
The civic building's the one that give you the tokens, right? The endgame scoring stuff.
Those are powerful.
Those are important. When I had like 2 of them and Wendy had like 7 of them one game, I definitely felt overwhelmingly like, uh-oh. But I'll say, even that
But
game
how could you have 7 of them? I mean, if you have 7 of them...
It wasn't actually 7.
Oh, I say, because then you don't have any
Hyperbole.
other buildings, and the civic buildings almost always play off your other buildings.
They do, but once you have so many of them, you will get points.
Sure.
Now the deck is that we've only played it 2 players. The deck is the same no matter the player count, right?
No, you
Or
drop
do you
the
add
deck.
more?
It's always 17 turns per person.
Okay, so you do build the same level of engine each time.
Yeah.
That I think is important. So I really enjoyed this game a lot. In fact, I as soon as we played it, I was like, can we play it again? Like I really, really liked this because I enjoy point salad, but for me, it's a frivolous know-nothing game. And so this has just a little bit more weight, and I appreciate just that little bit more. So it's still one that I'd be willing to play any night of the week because it's light enough, but it's got a little bit more to it. And so I appreciate the robustness of the system.
And to be fair, right, we have only played a 2-player. I think this is a great, Jordan on Board Game Breakfast does his weeknight games segment. I anticipate seeing this on there because it's a great, I want to spend maybe a half hour or so playing a quick little game, the 2 of us, but one that feels like you're building up and doing some cool stuff. This definitely works for that. There's just a few little persnickety things in there. For example, when you grab 2 cards, because you want to take quick turns. You don't want this to be a long, drawn-out game. So I'll just take 2 cards. Okay, I'm going to do this one, and I'm going to spend these things. Okay, perfect. Let me refill the market at the end of my turn. Which one was a building and which one was a resource?
I had that problem
Now, to
constantly.
be fair, the game gives you 2 tokens.
And I thought that was a dumb idea, and then I needed to use them.
However, using those tokens makes it feel clunky.
It does. We ended up not putting the tokens in the locations, but instead we were just like left, right, top, bottom. We just kind of left them in the same spot and we just altered them really quickly.
I was like, everybody watch when someone else takes cards. That way we can
So
tell
we
them
don't
which
have
ones go
to.
where. And people are like, oh, it was a building and a resource. Which direction? I have no idea.
Yeah.
And it does matter. You
It
can't be like,
does.
it doesn't matter when you put them back. Because the next part is like, well, I want those 2
wanted them
things
one
next to
way.
each other.
Well, and if I wanted to hyper AP, I could probably make those choices of like, ooh, what happens if I accidentally reveal a resource next to this building? I won't take that card. I'll do this one. There's stuff. there's stuff you could think about.
Okay, here's the thing. I like this game. I think it's fine. It's definitely, I kept calling the green salad and stuff because it it has that idea of point salad. It's stuck in my head. And
I keep calling it point salad, meaning to call it Point City, but point salad is what comes out.
the buildings don't mean anything, really, like the different kinds of buildings. So it's one of those city building games again where, I don't know, you build a TV station, build an ice cream truck, don't matter. It might be points, might not be points. I like it, but I'm giving it a 7, which is, and I don't want to sound negative on it, but here's the thing. I would never play this over Point Salad. And I'll tell you why. You said mindless, which is a, thanks for that derogatory term, but Point Salad is fantastic. I love that game. You put out, and I just play it. It's so fast. And I'm trying to grab points. Here, the game can really screech to a halt, because you're like, oh, I was planning to buy that card, and you just took it. And so now I got to rethink what I'm going to do. These are the resources I have permanent. These are resources I can spend. But I can use a resource that I take this turn to help build a building, which I think is a fun rule, but that rule slows the game down. Because I can take a resource next to this building and then build that building with that resource. And it just doesn't flow smoothly. I get that it's more complex than the original one. My argument would be that complexity doesn't make it more fun. It just makes it more complex. At the end of the day, it's the same game as Point Salad. You just had more rules to get there. So I enjoy it, but I can't review it in a vacuum. Point Salad is like an 8.59 for me. I play it all the time. This one is less so. But I still like it. So I don't want it to sound like I dislike the game. I just know the other one exists.
It's hard, and I kind of come in from a similar place. So I'm actually giving the same score. I'm giving this one a 7. I like it. It's definitely fun to me, and I enjoy that idea of like that minimal resource build, that engine build, but then having enough little options, getting a civic building, because if you get one of those tokens that lines up with what you're doing, or you get it early and it can kind of direct you of what you want to do overall, I think that's really well done. At the same time, I do feel like there's just like a little bit of clunkiness. You know, to be fair, I don't sing the praises of Point Salad. This Point Salad's probably a 7, 7.5 for me as well, like in the same range or so. But I think this one's going to serve a different purpose. I think this one is going to be really good for like when Wendy and I want to sit down and play a game that feels a little bit more rewarding through some of those mechanisms, through some of that work. But Point Salad, I'm trying not to make this comparison, right, constantly, but that's a game I can play with my family back in Vegas. Because this one, they will screech to a halt. They'll AP turns. They will have more struggles making a quick decision in this game. And so I know that this is a 7, but I see a few times where I'd be like, let's hurry this game along. But the two of us playing, I think that this is really good for that. So averaging all of that out, I think it's a very fun, neat game, 7 out of 10 for me.
Well, I'm just going to break the scale. I'm going to give this an 8.5. I really enjoyed it. For me, Point Salad is kind of at an 8. But this one, yeah, I found it to be very enjoyable. I think it's clever, that idea of I have to grab adjacent cards. And so I have this building I'm working towards, but if I don't have the right cards adjacent, I just have to take another turn to get there. And so I just really think that that's clever, being able to grab 2 resources at the same time, being able to pay for a building as you go. I like it. I like it a lot. And I really appreciate the engine building of creating those resources in front of you and deciding, do I want to get one of those buildings that gives me an endgame scoring token? Do I want to get resources? Am I just going to invest in grabbing all the resources that I want so I can get this big building I want? Or am I going to collect a bunch of little buildings and hopefully I'll eventually build up to something more? So I'm happy to play that. This is one of my weeknight games. I would play this almost anytime.
Well, there you go, folks. That's Point City from Flat Out Games. Definitely check out their stuff. They have a lot of great games. Until next time, I'm Tom Vassell.
I'm Chris Yee.
And I'm Wendy Yee.
Eat your city or salad.
Eat your salad. Eat your veggies in your city.